All right. Deep divers. Election day is like right around the corner. And I'm willing to bet that your crypto portfolio is sweating bullets right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty accurate assessment. I mean, it's a pretty tense time right now, both for the election and for the markets.
So to help us all figure out what's going on with this whole crypto election thing, we're going to do a deep dive today on a market commentary that came out just a couple of days ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's from Insights Company from November 1st, 2024. And get this, the title is Decision Point, Crypto Braces for the 2024 Elections.
Wow. Very catchy.
Right to the point.
Yeah, and definitely timely considering we're just a few days away from the election.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this deep dive, is trying to figure out what the crypto market is telling us as we're heading into the election and then what might happen after the results.
Right.
Okay, so one of the things that I thought was really interesting in this report was how they were talking about crypto prices being related to the election predictions, and they said it's actually getting stronger.
Yeah, that was a very interesting point. It's something that we've kind of seen develop over time, but it's definitely become more and more pronounced as we get closer to the election. I mean, they even include this chart in the report that compares Bitcoin's price movements with the probability of a Republican win.
Oh, wow.
And it's pretty striking how closely they've been moving together, especially when there's been like a surge in support for one of the candidates.
So does that mean we can just forget about the polls and watch the Bitcoin ticker to figure out who's going to win?
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
It's a correlation, not necessarily causation,
Right.
But it is really interesting to see that connection. And it does tell us that the crypto market is definitely paying attention to what's happening in the political world.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking of politics, the report also mentioned how crypto is, it's starting to gain a little bit more influence in Congress. And they specifically mentioned that Ohio Senate race, which is pretty intense.
Oh, yeah, that one's a real nail-biter. You've got Sherrod Brown, the incumbent Democrat, who's, the chair of the Senate Banking Committee. He's not exactly been crypto's biggest fan.
Yeah.
And then you've got Bernie Moreno, the Republican challenger, who's gotten a ton of support from those crypto super PACs. So it's kind of like the ultimate showdown between the crypto critic and the crypto champions.
It's like a boxing match.
Exactly.
But with the future of crypto regulation at stake.
Right. And the outcome of that race could have a pretty big impact on how crypto is treated in the U.S. If Moreno wins, it might signal that we're heading towards more crypto-friendly policies, but we'll just have to wait and see.
So we've got the politicians paying attention. We've got the traders biting their nails.
Right.
What about the average investor out there? What's the mood like as we head into Election Day?
Well, the report suggests that most investors are cautiously optimistic. They seem to think that regardless of who wins the White House, crypto is probably going to be okay. Some even think that a Republican win could be even better for the market.
Probably because of that whole perception that Republicans are a little bit more friendly towards crypto, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. The report also throws in a little bit of a warning. It says that things could get pretty rocky if the election results are super close or if there are any delays in the vote counting.
So basically, we should be prepared for a little bit of a wild ride.
Yeah. Buckle up. It could be a bumpy night.
So let's say somebody wants to place their bets on some specific cryptos. Are there any front runners in this whole election race?
Well, the report mentions two cryptos in particular that could do well, Bitcoin and Solana.
Okay, so Bitcoin, the old reliable, and then Solana. Why Solana?
So Bitcoin's kind of seen as, the safe bet, the one that benefits from any big market movements. And with all the talk about Bitcoin ETFs this year, there's a chance that we'll see a lot more institutional money flowing into Bitcoin.
Okay.
Solana, on the other hand, is more of a potential breakout star. It's got a good story behind it. It's been attracting a lot of developers, and it hasn't been as closely tied to Bitcoin as some other altcoins, which could make it a good hedge.
So Bitcoin for the steady gains and Solana for a potential moonshot.
Exactly.
Okay, but you know what I noticed in the report?
What's that?
They didn't really talk about Ethereum.
That's a good point. They didn't really explain why it was left out. But it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, maybe the Ethereum's just too cool for school now.
Maybe they figured everybody already knows about Ethereum.
It's like, come on, it's Ethereum.
Or maybe the market's just not sure what to make of it in this whole political landscape because it has been kind of lagging behind Bitcoin in terms of price lately.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got crypto reacting to every little change in the polls. We've got potential winners and losers emerging. But what's the overall vibe like right now in the market? Is everybody just sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for these election results?
Well, that's where things get a little bit weird. The report says that the market is acting a bit differently this time around compared to other big events that happened in crypto this year. They're talking about something called implied volatility, which is basically a measure of how much the market thinks prices are going to move.
Oh, okay.
You can think of it like the G-force meter on a roller coaster.
So is implied volatility like super high right now with the election just days away?
You would think so, right? Especially with how much the market freaked out over things like the Bitcoin ETF launch and the halving earlier this year.
Right.
But actually, the charts show that implied volatility for Bitcoin options hasn't really spiked that much ahead of the election.
So does that mean the market's expecting the election to be like a snooze fest for crypto?
Not necessarily. It's more nuanced than that. It's just that the market might not be expecting as much price volatility as we saw for those other events. It's like the market saying, okay, maybe there will be some ups and downs, but nothing too crazy in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so not a total snooze fest, but maybe not a complete meltdown either.
Exactly. And to add another layer to this, the report also talks about something called the volatility risk premium.
Okay, so what is that?
It's basically the difference between what the market expects to happen, implied volatility, and what actually happens, which is called realized volatility.
Okay, so like the difference between the forecast and the actual weather.
Exactly. It's like the market's way of saying, hey, we might be wrong about our predictions, so let's add a little bit of a cushion just in case.
So what is this risk premium telling us about the election? Is it saying like, don't worry, be happy, everything's going to be fine?
Well, not exactly right now. The volatility risk premium is actually much lower than it was before the Bitcoin ETF launch or the halving. So that suggests that the market might not be pricing in as much uncertainty or risk around the election as it did for those other events.
So it's not that they're expecting the election to have zero impact on crypto. They're just expecting a different kind of impact, maybe a little less explosive.
Right. And remember how we were talking about how a lot of investors seem to believe that crypto will be fine no matter who wins?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that confidence is reflected in this lower volatility risk premium.
So the market is basically saying, we're not really that worried about the election.
Something like that. But here's the thing. Even though implied volatility might be relatively low, there are some signs that things are starting to heat up in the market.
Like what?
Trading volumes?
Oh, yeah.
Remember those?
The heartbeat of the market?
Exactly. And guess what? They've been surging lately, way above average.
Let me check the charts. Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. They're up 30 to 40% above their 3-month average.
Yeah, so even though implied volatility isn't screaming big move coming, the fact that trading volumes are spiking suggests that something might be brewing.
Like everyone's quietly placing their bets before the election throws a wrench in everything.
That's a great way to put it. It's like the market is preparing for a big move, but it's doing it under the radar without making a big fuss in the options pricing.
Okay, so we've got this interesting mix of signals, relatively low implied volatility, but those trading volumes are going crazy. What does it all mean? Is the crypto market about to surprise us?
Well, if we put all the pieces together, it looks like the market might be gearing up for a breakout after months of sideways movement. Crypto might finally be ready to make a decisive move, and the election outcome, regardless of who wins, is probably going to be the trigger.
Okay, so you're saying even if the election results aren't a huge shock, it could still cause a big shift in the crypto market.
Exactly. It's about removing that uncertainty once the election is over. The market will have a much clearer picture of what the political landscape looks like. And that could lead to a lot of activity, whether it's bullish or bearish. Well, that's a big question.
All right, deep divers.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm grabbing my popcorn and getting ready for what's going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks. This whole crypto election roller coaster is just getting started.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
But before we get too caught up in the election drama, let's not forget that there's another big event on the horizon. The FOMC meeting is happening next week.
Right.
What could that mean for crypto? Will it amplify the post-election moves or throw us a curveball?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely be exploring further. The FOMC meeting could definitely add another layer of complexity or excitement to the crypto market.
So stay tuned, deep divers, because this deep dive is far from over.
So like we were saying, the crypto market is kind of like waiting with bated breath for the election to be over.
Yeah, for real. And even though we don't have a crystal ball or anything, I do like to speculate. So what are some of the possible scenarios that could play out after the election?
Well, let's start with what happens if the Republicans win. Like we said before, a lot of investors seem to think that would be good for crypto because, they're generally seen as more pro-crypto.
Okay, so let's say the results come in and it's a Republican victory and suddenly all the crypto charts go crazy.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Solana's doing backflips. Everybody's partying. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Remember, the report said Bitcoin and Solana could do really well, and a Republican win could push them even higher, especially if they actually follow through on some of their campaign promises about crypto.
Okay, but what if the Democrats win? Does that mean we should all be freaking out and selling all of our crypto?
No, not necessarily. Remember, the report also said that a lot of investors think crypto will be fine regardless of who wins. It's just that the potential gains might not be as big under a Democratic administration.
So maybe instead of a massive rally, it'll be more of a slow and steady climb.
Yeah, something like that. It's important to remember that Democrats aren't like totally against crypto. They just tend to be a little more cautious about regulation. You know, they want to protect consumers and make sure things don't get out of control.
Right. They're like the responsible parents of the crypto world.
Exactly. And that can sometimes create a little bit of uncertainty in the market, which can lead to price swings.
So we've got two main scenarios.
Yeah.
Republican win could lead to a big rally. Democrat win could lead to a more moderate response. But the report also brought up that whole what if scenario. Like,
Yes.
what if the election is super close? Or what if there are problems with the vote counting? You know, what happens then?
Yeah, that's the contested election scenario, and that's where things could get really messy. Imagine weeks of legal battles and recounts and all kinds of political drama.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good for crypto.
It's definitely a risk. Crypto is still a pretty young asset class, and it can be very volatile when there's a lot of uncertainty and fear in the market. Investors tend to pull back from risky investments, and crypto could definitely get hit.
So basically, if the election turns into a total nightmare, crypto could take a nosedive.
It's possible, but let's not dwell on the negative too much.
Everybody.
Let's shift gears for a second and talk about some of the other things that could affect the crypto market.
Okay, like what?
Remember how the report mentioned the FOMC meeting that's happening next week?
Oh, yeah. What is that again?
The FOMC is basically the group within the Federal Reserve that decides what to do about interest rates, inflation, all that economic stuff.
Okay, so how does it relate to crypto?
Yeah. Well, crypto can be pretty sensitive to changes in monetary policy, for example. If the FOMC decides to raise interest rates, it could make traditional investments like bonds more attractive, which could pull money out of crypto.
That would be bad for crypto.
It could be, but on the other hand, if the FOMC signals that they're going to keep interest rates low or maybe even do more stimulus, that could actually be good for crypto.
So it's kind of a wild card.
Exactly. We've got the election uncertainty, the potential for post-election volatility, and now we have to factor in the FOMC meeting. It's like trying to predict the weather in a hurricane.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of. But in the middle of all this chaos, I'm curious, what's your personal take on the crypto market right now? Are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic?
That's a tough one. I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic. I think the long-term outlook for crypto is still pretty good, but we definitely need to be prepared for some bumps in the road in the short term.
So you're saying we should be hopeful, but also realistic.
Exactly. Don't let the hype or the fear get to do your research, manage your risk, and be ready for anything.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, deep divers. Let's take a quick break. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to talk about. When we come back, we'll dive into some of the most important insights from that Insights Company report and discuss what it all means for you, the crypto enthusiast. Stay tuned. All right, deep divers, welcome back. We've talked about implied volatility and all those different election scenarios and all the craziness that could happen.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
It has. But before we wrap things up, I want to make sure we go over some of the key takeaways from that Insights Company report. One of the most important things for our listeners to remember as we get closer to Election Day.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the crypto market is showing signs of life. You know, after months of just kind of going sideways, things seem like they're ready to break out, and the election is probably going to be what sets it off.
Right. It's like everybody's just waiting for those results to come in so they can finally make a move.
Yeah, and even though implied volatility is a little bit low right now, those trading volumes that we talked about, those are telling us that something's happening behind the scenes.
Right. It's like the quiet before the storm.
Exactly. And we don't know for sure which way the market will go, but we do know that volatility means there's potential for both profits and losses. So you got to be ready for anything.
So basically be prepared for some price swings.
Exactly. Have your buy orders and your sell orders ready.
Another thing that stood out in the report was how investors seem to be pretty optimistic about crypto no matter who wins the election.
Yeah, there's a sense that crypto is going to be okay, but there are some differences in how people view the two candidates.
Right. Some people think a Republican win would be better for crypto because they're seen as more pro-crypto. but it's not like a guaranteed win either way.
Exactly. And no matter who wins, we have to pay attention to what they do about crypto regulation because that's going to have a big impact on the industry.
Speaking of regulation, we can't forget about that Ohio Senate race. That's going to be a big one.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be huge. The outcome of that race could change the whole landscape for crypto.
Okay, so we've got potential volatility, political uncertainty, regulatory battles. Anything else our listeners should be thinking about as we head into this next phase of the crypto world?
Well, remember, the FOMC meeting is happening next week, and that could have a big impact on crypto depending on what the Fed decides to do about interest rates.
Right, those macroeconomic factors could definitely affect the crypto market.
For sure. And one last thing, remember, knowledge is power.
Always.
Stay informed, do your research, and don't be afraid to look at things from different angles. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be.
I couldn't agree more. Well, deep divers, that brings us to the end of our deep dive on Decision Point, crypto braces for the 2024 elections. I hope you found this discussion helpful and maybe even a little bit fun.
It's been great talking about all this with you.
Likewise, and to our listeners, we'll leave you with this final thought. The crypto market is always moving, and the next few weeks are going to be especially interesting. So stay informed, stay vigilant, and as always, happy diving.